Welcome to OnTrac, a podcast where we talk with ag and construction professionals to find out how they keep their businesses on track. I'm Tori Weaver, Director of Sales for Ag and Construction.
I'm Alexandria Johnston, National Sales Executive.
And I'm Peyton Hines, the Brand Manager.
With us today, we have Russ Green, Managing Director of McCabe, the next generation of ag leaders, and Operations Officer at Machinery Advisors Consortium. Russ, thanks for jumping on with us today.
It's enjoyable.
So Russ, we traditionally kick these off with a little bit of a brag sheet. So you were the chairman of the Omaha Chamber of Commerce Agricultural Committee from 2009 to 2012. You were installed as a Nebraska Bridge Builder Association member in 2011. Twice appointed to the National FFA Sponsors Board. You earned your American degree in 2014 from the FFA. Your 12-year appointment to the Editorial Advisory Board of Agri-Marketing Magazine, served as a chairman of the National FFA Foundation Board of Trustees in 2015, and was also appointed in the inaugural class of Executive Ambassadors to the Future of America in 2022. What's running through your head when you hear all of that?
Well, my first feeling is one of humility, a bit humble, and I think it would be unfair to think that my stewardship or give back is based on my shoulders. I've been blessed with a great number of very, very strong mentors, very, very strong leaders, and in each of their character, they were also stewards of the environment. And whether I go back to my father-in-law, Bob Robertson, or the first person that hired me into a career, John Fennessy, I think of Jim Irwin and Jim Hitchner and John Carlson and George Russell and Helmut Kloss, Teal Fry, and most recently, Bob Crane, Bill Hurley, Carson Pedersen, Brad Arnold, Eric Henson. They're all strong people in the industry. And one of the impressions they made on me is don't stand still. When you're blessed with something, share it. And in each of those cases, I think what I learned from them and the examples that they set were examples that I could repeat. And I repeat them not only at my dinner table with my own children, but I would repeat them in the industry. So I've just been blessed with great coaches, and that goes all the way back to my youth and my academic career, and now in my professional career. So I think it's more of a tribute to them than it is to me.
That's awesome. And to go off of that, you really started all of this in teaching and coaching, and now you've moved into your professional career and have stuck in the ag and equipment industry for 40 plus years. You now continue that journey and give back to the same industry in this professional guidance. So walk us through what that journey looks like for you.
Well, like you said, it's 45 years, so be ready for a long walk. I was a teacher and a coach in the beginning of my career, and I'll end my career as a teacher and a coach. And a fun story, when I was teaching, they came to me and said they were going to give my job or look for my job for another teacher that could coach girls basketball. And I said, well, that's not me. So as later on, John Fennessy came back and said, hey, we're making a mistake. We really need to keep you as a teacher. You're doing a good job. And I said to John, you couldn't find your basketball coach. Go, well, we found him, but he doesn't have your teaching credentials. And I said, well, John, I want to coach too. I really need to for my income. He said, we'll work on that. And a couple of weeks later, he came back and said, we got a job for you. You're going to continue your teaching career, but we want you to be the assistant girls and boys tennis coach. And let me translate that for you. In Iowa, that means you drove the second bus. So it was more of a custodial position and a chaperone position. While I knew very little about tennis, I knew a lot about athletics. I knew a lot about preparation and practice and winning and losing. And fortunately, the head coach was really good. And he taught me a lot about tennis. I took it into my adult life, but it wasn't there long after that I pivoted away from education into agriculture. It was actually the father of my best friend who was an agricultural dealer, and I happened to be at his dealership at the right time, and I met some people. But as I look back at my career, like most people's career, it's shaped by the social economic times that you're in. And if you look back to the 70s, it was a time of industry consolidation. It was a time of global expansion. So in my career, the foundation of my learning about agricultural business came from International Harvester. And I spent 8 years with International Harvester from an Iowa location to Chicago. So I was actually working in downtown Chicago, 401 North Michigan, right next to the WGN building. And that was my foundation. But then I connected with leaders, and one of the leaders left the company and asked me to go with him to a global expansion company, Kloss, in 1982. And I followed David Williams. And it was hard. That first change of career, while today people are very portable, very mobile, less so than particularly when you have a family. So I went to Kloss, which was a German global entry to North America. And through consolidation, our plans changed, and my career needed to change. And I followed to Kubota, which likewise, at that time, Kubota was only 15 years old in North America. Last November, they celebrate their 50th year in North America. It was a California environment. While it was kind of fun for my family, it was far away from our heritage, far away from where my wife's family, my family in Southeast Iowa, and we just didn't want to be that far away growing up and with our children being out of the lifestyle of their grandparents. So I pivoted back and followed another leader out of Kubota and back to the Great Lakes with another German company, Deutz, who had purchased the Alice Chalmer company. And I came into that role in a kind of a leadership role in the tractor works and moved back closer to the Midwest so my children could have a Midwest work ethic. No sooner did I get there than a friend, Bob Ratliff, who came in as the CEO of that business, said, "Hey, we're moving this company from Milwaukee to Atlanta." Again, personally, that didn't work for me because I had a son who was a high school senior trying to choose his college, trying to compete in athletics. So I commuted for 14, 18 months back and forth, but was offered a job to stay in the Milwaukee market with now CNH. So if you follow that chronologically, I'm 42 years old. I've been with 4 agricultural companies, International Harvester to Kloss, Kloss to Kubota, and Kubota to Deutz Alice. And now I'm going back through them second time. So I go back to CNH in Racine, hired by George Russell, a friend of mine who I met in 1979 and I work with today. And had a great 15 years with CNH, both at the corporate level and the field level. Determined at a point in time I had a bit of a glass ceiling above me and I wasn't going to continue to progress. Helmut Kloss comes back to me and says, "Hey, I need somebody to run the North American business. Would you like to do it?" Now my children are out of the house. All 3 of them are pursuing their careers, pursuing their academics. We knew they were not coming back to Wisconsin. So I then pivoted to Omaha. And that's where you see a lot of the credentials with the Omaha Chamber, where you see it with the Nebraska Bridge Builders. Continued all the while and never slamming any door behind you. When you make these moves, you do it in a very professional career advancement method. And after 8 years at Omaha with Kloss, I felt somewhat fulfilled, and there was a kind of a change of direction again. The industry was changing. Kloss was going to a different distribution channel, which I wasn't comfortable with. So rather than to stay and have boardroom arguments, I exited Kloss, came to Kentucky, and started to work for a construction company, LBX, the Sumitomo company. Again, followed friendship into that position. And I would look at my watch at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I say, something about this just isn't right. There's not the variety. There's not the excitement. I just didn't feel energy. So I called a friend, Bob Crane, asked him if there was a position for me at AGCO. And he said, "We got a lot of things you can do. There's a number of things you do. I said, Bob, that's great, but my dog lives in Kentucky. I'm not going to move my 15th house. So he said, hey, what's the problem? You get a computer, you got a cell phone, we'll know where you're at, and you can lead a group of our branding with AGCO, product development with AGCO. And it was probably the last 7 years, the capstone of my W-2 career was probably as fun as any that I've ever had in my career. So today, put that in the history book. Today, I walk down two sides of the street. One side of the street, as you said, was with McCabe. Actually, the name comes from my first three grandchildren, Mac, Kaylee, and Ben. And it's a consultancy to young people who are second, third, and fourth generation agriculturalists. And each one of them is going to be a rock star. Each one of them is going to be a rock star in the North American agricultural environment. I have agronomists, I have marketing startups, I have ag retail, I have production ag. And each one of them, what we do is we have a Zoom call once a month and we share common problems. I find out what's rocks on the road and I help them pick it up. And I like to see them all personally, at least, once a year, but that doesn't always happen. But we're in a Zoom environment and I can probably be a life coach to them without necessarily touching them on the nose. So that's not monetized. I use that as a hobby, and they keep me relevant. What they know about agriculture, what I know about agriculture, two different spectrums. When I came into agriculture, a farmer was feeding 26 families. Today, an agriculturalist feeds 155 people. So the dynamic change, the digitization, I didn't have a cell phone until I was 39 years old. These young people get a cell phone at baptism, and they know how to use it in a digital manner. So the other side of my street that is monetized is I work with a group of 11 advisors in a group we call the Machinery Advisors Consortium. And George Russell is the founder of that consortium. And what we do, we bring dealers together in a peer group environment where they can share opportunities and they can share problems within that peer group. We meet twice a year face to face. We meet 2 more times a year in a virtual manner. And we have 53 corporations that have in total over 325 storefronts in retail, either construction or ag equipment. So the fulfillment of my life, I think, is I started as a teacher and an educator. Ag is my background and my platform, but finding ways to solve problems and create opportunity for people is where I have fun, and I love variety. So the Machinery Advisor just gives me that variety. The 53 corporations are in 33 states, and I get it. Many of them are transferring just as I am. They're transferring the leadership of their dealerships, like I am my family, from a 60, 70-year-old generation down to a 30, 35-year-old. So that's the nutshell. It is a little complex when you think about it. The burden has been on my wife to make the moves, to be the parent that's been the disciplinarian and the educator. And there's a glory in life. And what that glory is to see whether or not the people you taught, and in my case, Katie taught our children, to watch our 3 children, be parents and how they raise their children. So I get to step in as a grandparent periodically and muck things up and then step back and watch the damage. So that's the position.
I love that answer. I think it's great. Like you talked about previously, like don't stand still. One of the guys that I great respect, Dave Geyer, he actually told us when we were in college that grab a shirt tail and hang on. I mean, there's people and the connections you make and move through the industry, but make sure you're leaving an impact as you go.
I will remember the day I met the 3 of you. And it's been shortly ago, it's the last 30 days. I remember sitting in the basement of the Hyatt Regency in Chicago and the conversations we had, and I think the collection, you can tell pretty quickly where someone's passion is. You can tell what their spirit is. You can tell whether their commitment is. And I watch with a smile on my face. If you can remember now, I'm not wearing glasses today. So that means that that second eyeball has been corrected, and I don't have to put my finger through my glasses to understand whether you're paying attention or not.
100%. I will go down in history thinking I was paying attention and then not actually when you could put your finger through your glass lens.
That was a
It's a
good
story.
day.
It's a story you can tell in your next meeting.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about your passion for the ag industry and for education. I'm going to preface this by saying that all three of us are FFA alums with the National FFA organization. A lot of our dealers are connected to their local FFA chapters in some shape or form, as a parent, as a volunteer. Can you give us a little bit of a snapshot with your involvement with that organization and how that has contributed to who you are today?
I'd love to. And by the way, I would tell your dealers, keep it up. I would tell them to keep it up. I'm a numbers guy. I'm not an accountant for sure. My past CFOs will tell you that. But I am a numbers guy, and I like to work with data. So think about society today. And I tell this story in the realm of I think agriculture has 6 seasons. And I talk about that in the scope of person's lifestyle and career. So as an 8-year-old, you can join the 4-H. And every state has 4-H, and there's over 6.5 million members of the 4-H. And that's where you go to learn team skills, responsibility skills, so work habits. And from an 8 to a 12-year-old, you're in the FFA and probably have a number of projects that you display at the county fair. The wife of my nephew is the county extension officer in our community and does an excellent job of mentoring young people at that age group. So that's the first season. The next season is FFA. So from a 12, 13-year-old to a 19-year-old, you find an advisor. As Peyton says, you grab onto their shirt tail and they take you to different places, probably for the first time traveling out of state to a convention. And you see what the FFA is. And now we're talking a group of 740,000. So we've gone from 6.5 million to 740,000. And an excellent organization. I spent many years following the practices of the FFA. I was on the sponsors board, on the foundation board. Great people doing great things. And the center of the action is the advisor. And there's like 8,800 chapters in North America, and each one controlled by one or maybe multiple advisors if you're fortunate. And that's the secret sauce. Without a good local advisor, you don't have a good FFA. So I wondered, where did this 740,000 go to retire? So after the second season, after FA, they go to the AFA. And now the AFA is a collegiate level. I refer to it kind of a FFA on steroids. And it's not very mature. It's about 25 years old. So how did you behave as a 25-year-old? And it's a forming organization. And out of Kansas City, Mark Stewart is a CEO president. And I was just introduced to it in the last 14 months. I knew of it, I heard of it, but to the AFA, 200 universities, 8,000 students at the collegiate level. So you've gone from 6.5 million, 740,000, 8,000. And I'm just learning about it and just working with Tracy Vi to understand how I, as a what they call an executive ambassador, can make that contribution. But think of these numbers. I already mentioned that a farmer, when I entered the industry, was serving 26 families. In 2012, serving 155. There's 24 million people in agriculture. If 2.5% of them time out or retire each year, that means 600,000 new jobs are created with people that have to replace that 24 million people in agriculture. Well, if we have 8,000 people at the or probably the AFA level, 8,000 trying to go into a pool of 600,000 requirement where there's a shortage. And one of my responsibilities as an alumni of agriculture is to maintain the vitality of the industry. I've got a friend, Rob Syke, wrote a book called Food 5.0. Rob's a great entrepreneur. And he's coined a new term. He calls it sustainable intensification. The word sustainability is in our vocabulary, and it means different things to different people. But the math is not sustainable if you go from 6.5 million young people interested in agriculture at 4-H, which migrates down to 740,000 in their high school level, down to 8,000 at collegiate level, needing to fill 600,000 jobs. There's a gap there. So we need to promote agriculture, not only from a food supply, nutrition, abundance, and safety, but as a career, there's science and technology that is needed in agriculture. There are accountants that are needed in agriculture. There are attorneys that are needed in agriculture. There are strategists and educators that are needed in agriculture. So when you only have 1.6% of the population, those that are in agriculture, feeding 98% of the population, there's a gap in understanding. And it's incumbent upon us to close that gap of understanding. So, that's my FFA speech, but I think there's 6 seasons. You have the 4-H season, you have your FFA season, your AFA season, and then you enter the workplace. And some of you are at that state. You're in that season of your life. You've entered the workplace. You're establishing a reputation for yourself in the workplace. You maybe have demonstrated skills that you can take supervisory roles. So after the 4th season, entering is mentoring. Now you're a supervisor, and your responsibility is not only for the budget, not only for the deliverable of the numbers, but now you've got to grow other people that have entered the workforce. And you're mentoring others, and your mentoring skills and your understanding of the agriculture universe and the success of your company will determine how high you go in elevation of your career. So after your mentoring, and this is the bridge that I crossed in the 4th quarter of 2020, I got my last W-2 form, and then I had, how are you going to reflect back and return in a reflective stage? And that's what I'm doing now. I reflect on my mistakes, and I made a number of mistakes, uncountable number of mistakes, some of them social with my family, some of them in business. And I can help people overcome that bridge and not make the same mistakes, and also see the vistas that are in front of them to grow their career. So season 1, 4-H, season 2, FFA, season 3, AFA, season 4 is mentoring, season 5, entering, season 5 is a mentor, and then you reflect. So I think those seasons are important. And if you put them kind of in perspective, I had a seminal moment, and this will not surprise you. This will come as no surprise. I had a performance review with a person I truly admired. There's a true mentor. And we knocked it out of the park that year. 1998, we had an excellent year. And I wondered what Jim was going to tell me and reward me for the performance of our growth, our share, our strategic work. And I went into that discussion, and yeah, we hit all the metrics. I said, well, where's the improvement? He says, Russ, your team thinks a lot of you from your leadership, your strategic work, your communication. But the problem is it just takes you too long to say what you want to say. That comes as no surprise, right? Well, I left that discussion somewhat with a gray cloud over my head, saying some 4-letter words. So I went back to my desk, and I decided to write down my business philosophy so I could print it on the back of my business card. And I thought about that at great length. What would I say that I could tell somebody is my philosophy about life and business? So I did it in less than 10 words. And my 9-word speech, which has been on the back of my business card since 1998, says you lead by example, you drive customer happiness, you build trust, and you listen. And probably the most important verb from lead, drive, build is listen, because oftentimes people they don't hear what's being said in a meeting environment. They don't hear what's being said by your spouse. You don't hear what's being said by your children. And you can listen with your eyes. You can walk into an environment and tell whether or not it's a healthy environment. You can do that in somebody's home. You can do that on a sheep farm. You can do that in a university classroom. You can do that in a boardroom. And the ability to listen and synthesize what you've heard and connect the dots and the simplified things. So today, when somebody asks, well, what do you do? Well, what I do, when you ask me a question, I give you an answer. I don't try and explain the answer up front. I give you an answer, and I try and make you happy. And if you can do those two things, when people come to you and they come to you with a question, it could be a problem, it could be a curiosity. And I think curiosity is the heart of the matter. Answer the question and make them happy. If you can do that, you're going to be following some pretty good people.
So a couple of questions that we kind of finish out every podcast with, and I think that it's just kind of very important for us to be able to reflect on everything you've talked about, but also just take your advice and give it to others. The first one is, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing when you were starting your career, what would it be?
I'm going to go back and use the word curious, to be curious and not be afraid to take a risk, but calculate that risk. Know how that decision impacts others around you. I was a 19-year-old father, so decisions I made in balance with my family. I think like a milk stool, you have your family life, you have your business life, you have your community life, 3 legs of that stool, and you need to make sure those are in balance. But be curious. I wish I would have been a little bit more global at an early point in my career. One plank of my career that was absent. Like I said, I worked for 4 international companies come into North America, 2 German, one Japanese, and 1 Italian. And I learned a lot about them through travel and visiting there, but I didn't embed myself there. Had I been a person with less responsibilities as a parent, trying to raise a young family, being involved in an international operation, I think would have helped me in my career. That it is a global environment we're in. When China sneezes, we catch a cold. No pun intended, but that's the environment. So we're in a global environment that you need to understand it when you're making business decisions. And I think that curiosity about the global impact, and you do the math on who we're feeding. If a farm can feed 155 people, and we have 2 million farms, the math of that is we can feed 310 million. Well, we happen to have 335 million people in North America, in the US. So we have to be a global society to eat. And likewise, they do as well. So I think that's it. I think I'd be more curious and follow your ideals. I think character is built before you're 20 years old. So in the first 3 seasons of agriculture, 4-H, FFA, and AFA, you build your character. Everything after that's your style, how you perform in a style manner.
I completely agree with that. From there, if you had to look at the 3 of us and say, this is the one specific piece of advice that I give you in leadership moving forward, what would that be?
Peyton's already given it. Peyton broke the code early. You find out who the leaders are, and you hook your wagon to them and let them take you to the next place. So just like a parent, you tell your children to select your friends wisely. as an employee, select your leaders wisely. Find the people that are the adventurers, the trendsetters, the envelope stretchers, but the ones who you can tell who really genuinely cares about your well-being and who's just trying to improve their own position. So find that person, whoever she is, and make sure that you're following that person. In today's agricultural society, when I entered it in the 70s, it was a fat white guys club, and today it's diverse. It's the diversity, the equity, and the inclusion that we have today is rampant. We need to bring talent into our organization, and it's not going to come from Wapello, Iowa, or it's not going to come from Des Moines, Iowa, or Dallas, Texas. It's universal across the planet. Find who that leader is, listen to them, remember the speech, and lead by example and driving happiness and build trust. I think trust is a very strong word, but listen to what they're doing and take risks with them. And I think that will serve you well in your career.
And I think just to follow up with that, like, I completely appreciated the moment when we talked in Chicago and you made the comment of there's people who are appointed leaders and there are social leaders, and you find out those people very quickly. And I hope that at some point, each one of us can fall into one of those categories and really find our fit.
And you will. There's no doubt that you will. You know, a person like me with 4 companies and you invited back to them, yes, why? Because a lot of times when you leave, you burn bridges, or your reputation may not be one that allows you to come back. But if you've done the right things and you've treated people with propriety, with a sense of propriety, if you've recognized their value and if you've respected their position, I think there's 8 factors in a leadership's character, and I think the first one is trust and empathy, understanding what your team is going through, because not all their problems are the same problems that you have. They may be bringing social family problems into the environment. So trust and empathy, generosity and respect. Generous is not necessarily with a big paycheck, and it's not money that motivates everybody, but being generous with your time and being generous with your resources you do have. So trust and empathy, generosity and respect. And then you need a plan. You need to have alignment. And you need, if you have a vision and a mission and a strategy, you got to share that clearly. And the bigger the corporations, the harder that is to do. How do you bridge from the boardroom to the break room with what your vision is? You know, what is your strategy, and how are you going to deploy it with tactics? And then lastly, motivation. So when I graph it, the T for trust, and the E for empathy, and the A for alignment, and the M for motivation is team, TEAM. But the generosity and the respect, innovation, look for people that are thinking, how do we close the gap of our performance by training our people better or bringing in new technology that allows us to innovate? And we became more innovative, and we can make our people more productive. And then lastly is tenacity, because you're going to fail. It isn't a matter of when or if, it's when, and you will fail. You'll fail with the next job assignment. You'll fail with the next promotion. You'll fail with the next project, but you got to have tenacity to come back at it again. So across the horizontal line of that graph is generosity, respect, innovation, and tenacity, or grit. So when I put them together, it's team grit. When you have those characteristics as a leader, you're going to be connected, you're going to be collaborative, you're going to be adaptive. We use that word frequently in our consulting phase. And then lastly, you're going to be digital, because you can't always touch the nose of the person you're talking to, just as we are here today. You've got to be able to communicate in a digital manner. People go to bed at night with a computer 18 inches away from their ear, and the first thing in the morning they check it. and what's touched me digitally over the last 12 hours. So, yeah, I get up in the morning thinking about leadership and teamwork. I go to bed at night thinking about leadership and teamwork with a curiosity of what my children have done today to make the next generation better. What are my 7 grandchildren learning from their parents that's going to help them overcome the next controversy, overcome the next problem in school, overcome the next competition on the mat, in the swimming pool, on the field, wherever it may be. And the best lesson is life: learn how to lose. Learn how to lose, and what lesson you learn from losing, so you can come back next time and be maybe on the other side of the scorecard.
100%. I think all of that is really great advice. Don't slam doors behind you, but be able to communicate in a digital manner, because that's reality where we are today. So those are 2 really great pieces of advice. So we just want to thank you, Russ, for spending time to talk with us. We're excited to see what you accomplish in the next month and even the next few years to come. And don't be a stranger.
Whatever I do, it'll include you guys. You're fun. Yeah, I'm envious, quite candidly. I wish I was not ending my career in agriculture, but starting it, because the next 40 years are going to be as exciting as the past, even more so. A great line in a magazine article I've written in the last week: agricultural has never moved as fast as it's moved in the last 5 years, and it'll never be this slow again. Because if we have to feed more people, if we're losing 175 acres an hour of productive farmland to expansion and growth of our urban societies, then that means the land we do have is going to have to be that more productive. So to Rob Sykes' word of sustainable intensification, those 2 words are in balance. Whatever we do to intensify the work of our agriculture has to be sustainable. It has to protect this planet for those that are going to, I want my grandchildren to have the same green space and the same opportunity that I had. So I appreciate it, guys. It was a good use of my time.
It was fantastic. Thank you so much.
OnTrac is brought to you by TracTru, where we are here for you. We're professional problem solvers who use digital advertising and web design to help our clients thrive. Visit TracTru.com for more. That's TracTru.com.